So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Merkle webinar, Next Best Experience. Thank you all for joining. I hope you can hear me well. If not, please let me know. My name is Joel Flammann, and I'm heading our client business in Germany. Being part of the Merkle DACH organization, I'm happy to welcome you all from your different locations and countries. I'm excited to be your host today for this exclusive event that we're featuring today for the telco industry in the DACH region. Some of you might know us in Germany and Switzerland as former Nemex. Since April this year, we're going to market with the brand Merkle as part of the Dentsu network. Merkle's focus is customer experience management, data-driven digital transformation, and we are a full-service agency that delivers end-to-end value for our customers. So the topic of how to engage with customers, how to deliver best-in-class customer journeys, and how to personalize touchpoints is something that drives us, and probably you as well, every day. So I'm pleased to have with me today Simon Esland, Decisioning Practice Leader for Merkle EMEA, former Group Head of Marketing Technology Strategy at Vodafone UK, and Mark Clydesdale, Head of Transformation Strategy for Merkle EMEA. But before we start, and I hand over to those gentlemen, some housekeeping information. We will have some time at the end for your questions, so you can use the question tab comment function to enter your question during the session, and we will come back to these at the end. And also, we will record this webinar for those of you who will have to drop a little bit earlier, or the ones that couldn't join today. If you have questions after this webinar, or you would like to discuss a specific way forward for your company, please reach out to me or my colleague, Patrick Havel, who's also in this call. We will share our contact info after this webinar with you. So let's get started, gentlemen. The stage is yours.
Perfect. Thanks, Joel. Okay. Just a quick one before we get going. Just to build on Joel's comment. So we are going to talk to you today about customer experience transformation and how next best experience is a key enabler of driving that change. Merkle has a large decisioning capability, marketing decisioning capability here in EMEA. We're one of the largest practices in the whole of the region. And we have a wealth of existing clients that we've supported with driving CX transformation over the years, and we'll talk more about that as we go. So today's presentation will be formed broadly of three pieces. So I'll kick us off talking about what we mean by customer experience transformation. What does a leading CX business look like? And then pivot into talking about how executing next best experience. So first of all, I'll define what we mean by next best experience, and then explain how that enables you to become a CX leader. Mark will then spend some time talking about one of the key building blocks for driving CX transformation, which is around organization transformation. This call is absolutely not a technology call. This call is about total holistic CX transformation. So Mark will spend quite some time talking about one of the key building blocks around organization transformation. And then I'll finish off running through a quick case of one of our existing clients who has driven this type of change. Please ask questions as we go. There's a questions panel on the interface. We've allocated some time at the end to cover off any of those questions. So as we're going, please just ask us questions and we'll cover all of those at the end. Okay, so customer experience transformation. Our definition, so Merkle's definition of customer experience transformation is the transformation of a company into a market leader through the implementation of a customer-centered strategy with the underlying infrastructure to support that. So what we mean by that is that the data is reorganized to enable the delivery of the experiences that you want to deliver for your customers, that you're able to deliver a truly immersive end-to-end digital experience. So the experience in the digital channel is as good, if not better, than experience in sort of legacy non-digital channels, and that the organization infrastructure is designed to support that way of working. And brands that deliver true total customer experience, first of all, start from, so if we kind of work left to right on this slide, they start off by delivering genuinely hyper-personalized experiences. And when we talk about hyper-personalized experiences, we mean one-to-one experiences. So making decisions about what we want to talk to that customer about at that moment in time. So we're not talking here about audience or segment level conversations, but literally making decisions on the fly at an individual level. Those decisions or experiences are then executed through world-class activation capabilities. And so that means that we're not just making decisions about the what, so what is it that we want to talk to that customer about, but we're also making decisions about how we present that communication to the customer as an individualized decision for that customer. So that might mean, for example, that we are dynamically assembling content in the digital channel for that specific message, for that specific customer in real time. That's of course underpinned by having the right data available to us at the moment that we need it, the ability to resolve identity without the customer having to log in or authenticate in any way. And of course, it's driven by having the right analytics in place so that we can make sure that the message or experience that we execute for that customer is as relevant and timely and meaningful as possible. So that experience, in terms of that hyper-personalized one-to-one experience, is guided by the transformational strategy and blueprint. So having your teams organized in a way that enables you to be able to deliver those types of experiences for your customers, breaking down the silos that might exist within the organization between different functional teams, different commercial teams, different product teams to deliver this seamless end-to-end experience. And if you get all those building blocks in place, then that results in genuine enterprise level growth. So it drives customer lifetime value. So for telcos like you, that's ARPU, but also long-term CLV. And ultimately, it delivers improved shareholder value. And that's what we would like to talk to you about today. I think it's important that we define right up front that we know that lots of telcos have spent a lot of time trying to create omni-channel communications and have spent a lot of time trying to connect all of their existing touch points or channels to deliver this sort of seamless experience. So across contact centers, telesales, retail stores, into outbound channels, into the digital estate. But when we talk about total CX, we're talking about every touch point that we have with a customer. So that means those channels that are owned by you as an organization, but also those channels that you don't own. So into paid media, into earned media, and such like. So when a customer is on Google searching for a new price plan, or they go on Facebook and they might be looking at a new device, that you're making sure that you're presenting the right message to that customer in that channel, as well as you would do as if they were on your own website. So gone are the days, I think, where it's okay to deliver a personalized experience in own channels and then let the kind of brand and comms guys manage the above the line external paid marketing. The modern CX business needs to control all of those different touch points and ensure that you're delivering a consistent experience across all of those channels all the time. So that I guess is our definition of CX transformation, total customer experience management. What I'm now going to walk you through is how next best experience is a key enabler of that CX transformation. And we'll start off maybe talking about the kind of transition, I guess, from the historic days, where we've probably got to broadly as an industry today, and where we need to try and get to next. And I think this slide nicely articulates that journey. So I'm from the UK. I think this is common across the whole of the DACH region. So back in the day, probably not my generation, but my parents' generation had, and let's use an analogy here of a bank, because I think it works really nicely, had a personal relationship with their bank manager. So if they wanted to get a mortgage, to buy a new home, maybe take a loan to buy a car or something like this. They would go and have an appointment with the bank manager, and the bank manager would greet the individual, and they'd have a conversation about how the family was and how life was going. That bank manager had a genuine understanding of that customer at a personal level. They empathized with the customer, they understood the drivers for the customer, had an understanding of what that individual's aspirations were. They had an understanding of clearly affordability around these products and services. So when the individual was having the conversation with the bank manager, it felt genuinely personal because it was genuinely personal. Of course, there were underlying structures in the bank that governed lending criteria and such like, but the experience that was delivered for the individual was very, very personal for that individual. So when they were being sold to, whether it might be a recommendation of a new credit card or an insurance product, it didn't feel like they were being sold to. It just felt like somebody who they knew was recommending something that might be suitable for them. Now, that model was brilliant in terms of creating that personalized experience, but it was incredibly costly and wasn't particularly scalable. So then businesses, and I know I'm kind of telling you a story that you already know, but it's good to set the context. Businesses then started to look at how can we try and replicate that personalized experience, but in a much more automated, mechanized way. And I think that's kind of where we've got to today, where we've invested as a telco industry in quite a lot of technology. We've invested in potentially new business models, and we've got to the point where we can deliver pretty good communications consistently across channels that delivers that kind of wall effect. So whether you're in the retail store, in contact center, or on digital, you'll kind of see the same message, and that message is pretty well targeted for you as an individual. But broadly speaking, it's about selling. Okay, so we've kind of fallen into the trap, I think, of thinking about this as next best offer. So what is it, the next thing that I can sell to this customer? So the customer's already got a mobile plan with me. Maybe I can cross-sell them a fixed line service, or the customer's got mobile and fixed. Maybe I try and upsell them onto TV, or if they're a 1P customer, I try and maybe sell them an insurance product, or I don't know, a kind of an entertainment pack. But it's always on the backbone of trying to sell stuff. Where I think we need to go next is take a lot of the learnings that we've had from that next best offer environment and take that forward into next best experience. So replicate the experience that the individual had with the bank manager all those days gone by, and deliver that in an automated, mechanized way across all of the different domains that exist within an organization. So absolutely the marketing organization, the sales organization, but also building in the service component as well, so that when we're making decisions about the next best action or experience for that individual, we're thinking about the customer holistically. And so, to give you an example on that, it might well be that the best thing for that customer isn't an upsell offer or a cross-sell offer. So if we look at this slide here, what this slide is saying essentially is that we need to put the customer at the heart of the organization. And we've got three different paradigms here. We've got the marketing organization, the sales organization, and the service organization. And for each of those organizations, there's an arbitration or a decision about what's the best thing that I could present to that customer right now. And then looking at the customer as a whole, what's the best thing that I can present to this customer? So in this scenario, as you might expect, the best thing actually would be to present a service message, because again, let's bring this into telco environment. It might be, for example, you've got a customer that calls you up every month just before their statement's issued to find out what their bill amount is. So that's a pretty poor experience for the customer, because they have to spend time calling you up and speaking to you. It's also pretty poor for you as a telco, because you have to pay for that call. So it would be much better if we could find a way of proactively, first of all, predicting when we think the customer is most likely to call us. So we've got the previous calling patterns, so we can predict using analytics when the customer is most likely to contact us, and then proactively communicating to the customer their bill statement. So whether that's via an SMS or a push notification, we can stop the customer having to call us in the first place, which delivers that customer a better experience. and it also saves you money. Okay, so it's a win-win for both the customer and the organization. And maybe off the back of that, you then encourage the customer to download your mobile app so they can check their statement whenever they want, which also then clearly opens up a new channel for you to be able to communicate other actions. If we only looked at the decision in the constraints of either the sales or marketing domains, we would never have executed that communication. That customer would have continued to have called us every month. We'd have continued to have to pay for that call, and potentially over the time the customer was with you, that would cause dissatisfaction, and that might ultimately be one of the drivers for a customer looking around for a new deal. So I think hopefully that this example articulates, first of all, what we mean by next experience. So really making decisions in the round, and then secondly, why it's really important to include the service organization within that decision, as opposed to just the traditional sales and marketing, as we might have done previously with next best offer or next best action. So to deliver that type of experience requires what we call a central brain that sits at the center of the organization. And that brain is able to make decisions in real time in terms of what's the next best experience for that customer. And in order for the brain to make those decisions, it requires a whole bunch of data. So all of your sort of traditional offline data that might exist in your data warehouse, in your BI organization, but also a whole bunch of real-time data as well. So data coming out of your charging system, so that the brain can understand utilization of data allowances, for example. It also requires lots of contextual information. So if the customer is talking to you in the contact center, what's the conversation about? What's the subject that the customer wants to talk to you about? Ideally, if you've got real-time NLP capability, what's the sentiment of that customer? Are they happy? Are they neutral? Are they angry? Which will help govern the type of message that you might want to present to that customer. We should be harvesting all of the rich contextual data that we get from the digital channel. What page are they viewing? What was the page they viewed previously? Maybe where did they come from? How long have they spent on the page? And so taking all of that data, plus all of your analytics from your big data environments, so where your data scientists are creating really smart analytics, pull all of that information in, and then use all of that information as the basis then of building a set of journeys that you then want to be able to execute for your customer. Excuse me. But these journeys are dynamic, okay? So they're not journeys in the old sense that we used to think about in terms of customer going from A to B to C to D. They are rather fragments of journeys that can be pieced together dynamically based on the current state of that customer. So the more that you understand about that customer, the more you can predict the next best experience for that customer to move them along a journey that the customer defines for you rather than you defining for the customer. So taking the signals that we see from the customer to define that next best experience. And so with all of those pieces of data, all of those journey fragments that exist, we then perform an arbitration. So of all of the things that we could talk to the customer about right now, what is the most important thing to talk to the customer about? And then present that communication, and then orchestrate that decision into the activation channels, as I mentioned earlier. So whether that's into it with a really personalized piece of communication in a digital channel, or it's a call through telesales, or it's a push notification via your app, and then listening to see the response to that communication, and then running that process again. So this underlying capability is absolutely critical to be able to deliver that next best experience, which then delivers that CX transformation. And by having those types of capabilities in place, enable you to deliver truly game-changing communication. So I'll pull out a couple of examples here, which are not telco related, but I think it's interesting to kind of get an outside-in view. So one example might be from a car finance company, and where your analytics are predicting that there might be future payment difficulties. Rather than waiting for the customer to call you to say, hey, I can't pay my loan payment this month, why not proactively reach out to that customer up front and maybe suggest a new payment plan if the customer's facing or experiencing difficulties with their finances right now. Or equally, another example that might be pertinent for us as we start to get out of our homes and get back on the road, working and so on. If you're an airline or an airport operator, then wouldn't it be a great experience to deliver a push notification to a customer as they're approaching the airport with real-time availability of parking spaces and maybe queue time for security? So don't deliver that the day before or in the morning when it's not relevant, but at the moment that it becomes relevant for that customer, so based on geolocation, for example, to deliver that message just at the right time that the customer says, okay, if I go to level 3, I'm going to find a parking space. These are the types of experiences that we think are game-changing in terms of delivering that value to the customer and then ultimately the value to your organization. Okay, so that's a little bit about CX transformation powered by next best experience and some of the capabilities that are required to drive that next best experience. I'm now going to hand you over to Mark, who is going to talk you through the really important piece that we talked about earlier around having that organizational infrastructure in place in order to be able to deliver those experiences.
Thanks, Simon. So Simon said at the start of this call that this isn't just about technology. Obviously, when we're talking about next experience, you do need a series of elements in delivering that. And as Simon's just said, there is the idea of a central brain that we can make decisions in. We talk about 3 stages here in what we need to do. And stage 1 is making something work. So you might recognize you need that central brain and that you're going to need to connect it as part of the organization. And step 1 is implementing that tool and making sure it does work. And so you might put in your decisioning brain, you might connect a channel or 2 channels to it. You now know that the adaptive modeling works and the system's up and running. So that's great. But we can't stop there. We then need to think about how we make that better by integrating that capability with other areas. So it might be that decisioning brain now needs to talk to your digital systems. It needs to talk to the things that you use to serve offers in the commerce space or the paid media space. And that's not then just about connecting the decisioning brain to those bits of kit as well. There's also figuring out the processes between the different teams that own those platforms and those capabilities and how they deliver in those elements. So now we need to optimize and integrate all of our capabilities together. The final stage to really get all of the value out of this, making it bigger, is through the organization and making sure that if you want to deliver next best experience, your teams and your processes are aligned to deliver things for a customer at that more personal level. And to do that, we talk about the adaptive organization and the principles around how you need to set up to actually deliver next best experience. So there's a very big diagram on the page in front of you now in terms of what that adaptive customer experience organization could look like. And so I'll talk you through some of the elements of this. The first thing to know is what we've got down here at the bottom are the things that make your business tick. The products, the things you sell, post-pay, prepay, fixed line, TV, handsets, accessories, all of those things. And then the sales channels with which customers actually interact with you, your branches, your website, your call centers, your app, if you have one. You aren't a business without those things, but what we tend to see is businesses grow up and organize themselves around them. So your P&Ls might be held at a prepay, post-pay, fixed line level. Your teams might be structured around your web capabilities, your CRM capabilities, your call center, and your retail capabilities. To Simon's point earlier about the personal relationship and getting back to that, we find that is not the best way to actually set yourselves up. If you want to think about truly offering a more personalized experience to customers, we need to give people a different purpose, and that purpose needs to be aligned to your business objectives. So you'll see in the kind of big box in the middle a series of what we've called cross-functional customer experience teams. They've been labeled squad A, B, C, D. You need to make a decision as to what your objectives are, and your squads need to align to that. So if you're serious about offering the next best experience, it might be that you want to start organizing around different customer groups, different customer types, different experiences you want to offer, or different outcomes you want to drive. If you are still arranged in a team that says, okay, we're going to sell so many broadband connections this year, when you work your way through that customer journey that Simon was showing you, you're going to keep trying to sell broadband all of the points that you want to. So how do we now think about a different purpose, a different objective, that then you can set targets that enable you to actually think about offering an experience and grow lifetime value over time. The reason they're cross-functional is when we talk about integrating those capabilities, what you might have had in the past, as we say, is a customer relationship management or a customer value management team over here, a digital media team over here, a web commerce team over here. And each of them are very smart and they're doing really good things in their channels, but it's a bit disconnected. What I choose to send to this customer in CRM might be different to the choice we're making about a customer on the website when we do know them and they are logged in and we can serve them something personal to them. If we're going to have this decisioning brain, we need those teams to work together and change that process and the ways of working. And what you tend to find is when you come to reorganize these teams, people are resistant, they fear losing power. The digital guys don't want to be told what to do by the CBM guys and vice versa. So it's moving to this kind of cross-functional purpose where it's not about taking away power, it's about putting people together and giving them this new objective and going, you smart people work with you smart people to deliver the better experiences across all of the channels and take advantage of that decisioning capability, take advantage of those web capabilities, take advantage of those digital capabilities. So you'll see down the side then the idea of the chapters. This might be the roles that we then put in those cross-functional teams, guided by product owners, maybe guided by Scrum Masters if you're keen on using agile principles to the best that they can be to speed up how quickly you can release value and be more flexible and adaptive to the data that's coming in. We can talk more at length about how the setup of these teams can kind of promote collaboration and talent development, but that's probably for kind of a webinar at another time. These teams need to be driven by data and analytics, but data and analytics is a big thing, particularly in the telco world. And when we say data and analytics, what do we mean? We might talk about, BI and data engineering and all of that data that needs to be of a certain quality in the reports and the dashboards that we want to be available at people's fingertips. We might talk about data science and how we build big data models or how we fuel adaptive and predictive models that might work alongside or within the decisioning capability. We might talk about that more slow-moving strategic insight as to what's going on in the marketplace, what are the competitors doing, how's customer behavior changing. Or we might talk about performance analytics. How well is marketing working? How well are customers reacting to the experiences we're putting in front of them, and are we succeeding in changing their behavior? And so we'll think about where those things live in the organization, but particularly what then needs to be embedded back into these cross-functional teams. We've worked with a number of telcos where we can show examples of squads, cross-functional teams that have analysts in the team versus those that don't. And the ones with analysts in the team, it's transformative. They are miles ahead of the others because they are able to understand and react and forecast and make better decisions within themselves without having to rely somewhere else. So it's important to look at the balance of where these things live in your organization and what they drive. You'll see in kind of the middle layer, there is a particular decisioning or orchestration team called out. Now, this is something that was debated with different clients based on your culture and the technology that you choose to use. But quite often, if you were talking about cross-functional end-to-end teams, there would be a discussion about whether I should have my decisioneers or my technical execution people in my squads. And in theory, having that autonomy for a squad to be able to deliver things end-to-end is great, and it sounds great. But in reality, what you can find sometimes with these decisioning engine capabilities is they're quite complicated, and the resource for them is quite scarce. And sometimes it is more efficient to actually pull people out into a center of excellence that is about configuring systems. They are still marketers, they are still right message, right place, right time, but they know how to use the systems. And what could have ended up of being 14 decisioneers in each of the squads could now maybe be 7 as a center of excellence that serves each of those squads, and you can make your business more cost effective. It can also help you to kind of arbitrate, because if all of the squads are briefing this much activity, we can have another element of prioritization in there to say, well, The thing is, you're asking me for 120 points worth of changes this week, and I can only do 80. So what do we put on this backlog, and what do we defer to the next sprint? And so quite often when we're looking at true next best experience in a telco using a decisioning engine, we're setting up centers of excellence that know how to do that decisioning element. We've then also got where the brand and content comes from. So if you really want to put these elements together and offer an experience in these channels, you need to think about how that content is going to be constructive and how you're going to build and approve content. It's not going to be any more that you have one execution that your brand team or your chief marketing officer signs off and says, yes, I like that campaign. We might now be building things up from different elements, different templates for backgrounds, different templates for offers, different wording personalizations for family customers or non-family customers, or travelers versus non-travelers. And so we need a new way to kind of create and approve dynamic assets, that digital and dynamic creative assets. And so having brand and content teams that are about building specialized content within templates, but we then know how that is managed and can be constructed together by the decisioning and orchestration team guided by the squads, starts to get us to this ability that we can do things very quickly, very flexibly, and very adaptively. You'll see the kind of IT layer and the shared services layer at the bottom. It's important to differentiate that orchestration team is not an IT team. An IT team stands up platforms and lets them, makes sure they're usable and they're plugged in and they work, but they shouldn't be about building logic to actually deliver next best experience. That's got to live within our marketing and commercial layer. And we do need some alignment at the top. So when you get to next best experience, we are at this point where the customer's going to be on the website, or you're going to send them an email, or they're going to be in a call center, and we have the option to present something to them. The point is, at this point, everything now becomes a trade-off. So you might have presented them the latest broadband offer, but then, as Simon says, you've got some latest contextual information that you think is better right now to tell them that they're about to hit their data cap. And so you need to understand that when you make a decision to prioritize some elements over other elements, there's a trade-off. Something's going to go up and something's going to go down. And so you need kind of those collaboration, those alignment forums to discuss prioritization, but not in a way that takes autonomy away from the business and slows everything down. So that's a kind of a whistle-stop tour as to what the organization should look like, and hopes to start to give you the sense of all of those elements that you need to think about how you pull them together if you really are going to kind of put experience at the heart of what you deliver for customers. I've talked about that a lot in the context of how it helps you enable decisioning, but another kind of key point to make is we work with other organizations that might not be going down the decisioning route. They're just keen to become a more agile or adaptive organization that puts customers at the heart of what they're doing, and we see these organizations outperform, so generating better results, shorter campaign turnaround times, making better decisions, offering more relevant content to customers, that then generates better response and ultimately better sales and profitability. So there's an advantage to doing this even if you aren't thinking about implementing a decisioning engine. And I remember one of the first times that I saw Simon present, he talked about technology in the organization. And when you need technology to do something, it's expensive and it takes time, but broadly it's straightforward. You know the roadmap that you need to go on, and you just have to kind of get through the steps. Whereas organizational change can be trickier, to really realign your governance, to change how you set targets as a business, to move things around. It's complicated. There will always be the advantage to making the organizational change, and you will need to do the organizational change to get the benefit out of the technology. So make sure you're thinking about both. And if you're thinking where to begin, I would say begin with the organization, because you'll unlock benefits sooner, and it'll mean when you put the technology in, you'll be able to get the advantage out of that quicker as well. The final point I want to make is around whether you are doing this all yourself or whether you're trying to rely on a third party to do it. So you don't need to do it all yourself. I think everyone will be aware of the idea of outsourcing something to a third party and maybe running a capability as a managed service through a partner, or the idea of in-housing it so you do it yourselves. What we're seeing increasingly is more hybrid models coming into effect. So it's not that you make one of those two quite binary choices, someone else does it or I do it. It might be that you do it, but with some help from an agency or a partner that's either helping you stand up the capability or is providing you with a flexible model, so that if you have variances in your kind of capacity that you need over the year or over the course of events or trading periods, they can provide you some flexibility to kind of augment and bolster your teams as is needed. It might be that you want to largely outsource it, but retain some strategic control, or have your people learn how something is done from your partner as they're doing it. What we tend to find is partners that are specialized in delivering technology or technical implementations or configuring systems do it across multiple clients in multiple industries, and so they gain a level of expertise and innovation that is hard to keep up with if you just do it yourselves. And so the idea of a hybrid sourcing model, whereby you're either getting them in to bring in some innovation and some capacity and capability when you need it, or you're learning from them when they're doing it, is advantageous for you, because it allows you to get to that level of expertise, as well as giving you that kind of flexibility in how you deliver it cost effectively. So that's me. I'll pass you back to Simon to talk about what Vodafone did.
Thank you very much, Mark. Okay, I'll speak for a few moments on this, and I think that the purpose of including the case study is to try and make it clear to everybody that this is not theory. Okay, we have worked with a number of telecoms businesses across the EMEA region on helping them drive towards this outcome. And we wanted to zero in today on Vodafone in particular, given that they are local to the DACH region. So Vodafone Germany is on the journey towards driving CX transformation through next best experience. But there are a number of other telecoms businesses and other organizations across the region that are also on this journey. I think the second thing is, and this might sound a little bit trite, but I think you kind of never get to the end of this, right? There are always improvements that can be made. So it's not a kind of one-off project that you bring in, you deliver, and then you move on to the next thing. It's a kind of a constant, continuous process improvement around optimizing CX. How do you make tweaks here and there? So the story I'm going to tell you today is very much a work in progress in Vodafone, as they continue to really invest and focus on delivering the best experience that they possibly can for their customers. So I think probably everybody's familiar with Vodafone, but just to provide some context in case you're not. So Vodafone is a global communications business, started out as a mobile player back in the early 90s, but is now pretty much a total comms player across all of the markets it operates in. It has a large footprint in Europe, operates across 14 or 15 different territories within Europe, and also has a significant footprint in sub-Saharan Africa, and to a lesser extent in the Middle East and South Asia. And it's a very, very large business. Their customers consume more than 5 billion minutes of voice every day. They consume more than 1 billion minutes of streaming video. It's a very significant business in terms of the size of the customer base and the amount of activity that's happening on that base. And I think back in around 2015, so quite a while ago now, that the program initially kicked off, Vodafone recognized that they needed to start to make further investments in how they managed customer experience. I think at that time they were thinking probably more in the next best offer, next best action domain, and then more recently have moved into thinking about how do we deliver that next best experience. But the initial starting point was to think about, okay, we've got all this capability that we've invested in, all of these really smart marketers delivering campaigns to our customers, but the experience for our customers is pretty disjointed. We've got outbound tools that send emails and calls from telesales. We've got inbound tools, so when a customer calls us in the contact center, we can present them with a targeted communication. We've got other capabilities as well. So if you're a prepaid customer and you're about to run out of balance, we might send you a kind of personalized top-up offer, or if you haven't used your phone for a while, we'll send you a personalized inactivity message. But all of these communications are happening in isolation of one another, and we're not delivering this kind of joined up experience for the customer whereby we can communicate with the customer across any channel with consistent messages. So Vodafone looked at this in two ways, which, as we've kind of talked through today, aligns exactly with what we've talked to you about. So there was a technology component, and that required putting in a capability, so that brain that we talked about before, and then also an organization transformation. So how do we change the way that we run and organize our business in order to be able to deliver these types of experiences? And I'll maybe just walk you through a little bit the process that Vodafone went through in order to be able to transform its organization to deliver these experiences. So this program, which Vodafone calls Always On Marketing, was delivered across their whole European footprint. So all of their different operating companies in Europe have implemented the program. And some of the lead markets got together and started to kind of try and think through what would our future operating model for communications look like if we did things differently, and iterated across a number of different versions of that operating model until they got to the point of an operating model that they were comfortable with, and then started implementing that operating model across their geographies. And that operating model was, as Mark described in terms of his organization design, kind of agile at its core. So, there was an agile organization creating squads that were autonomous, focused on achieving a specific business objective, which drove, I think, significant improvement in terms of focus on driving customer outcomes and also throughput of activity. And so a lot of time was spent designing that operating model. And I think there were probably three main outcomes as a result of that new operating model, which really transformed the way that Vodafone operated. So the first one was around improved or increased collaboration. So again, as Mark mentioned earlier, previously the organization had quite a siloed organization. So there would be the customer value management team that was responsible for defining the kind of commercial programs to be able to manage customers through that life cycle. You might have teams that were focused from a channel perspective. So there was digital teams, there was contact center teams and such like. You had product organizations, you had data organizations. And so lots of different teams who were working really hard at achieving their KPIs, but they didn't collaborate particularly well together. So by bringing everybody together into a squad, so a multidisciplined squad in terms of commercial people, marketing people, data scientists, technologists, it immediately improved that collaboration. It meant that things that might have taken months previously could be done in days or weeks. The second outcome that by this new organization was improved decision making. So as part of the implementation of the technology, there was much better visibility around performance of programs. So think about running the brain a little bit like a cockpit in an airplane. So you move from a world of, and I'm going to be a little critical here of kind of telco marketers. As a former telco marketer myself, I feel kind of, I'm in the place to be able to make that comment. I think telco marketers of old are a little bit like project managers. So they run around engaging with lots of different people in the business in order to get them to do something in order to be able to drive an outcome. And so, and sometimes the outcome is regarded as a success as opposed to actually the results that were driven. When you move to this always on next best experience approach, that sort of campaign factory idea kind of dissipates somewhat, and it's much more about having a machine that is running always on 24/7 and making tweaks and changes to that. So if you then got the right reporting and dashboarding that sits on top of that, it enables you to then make much better commercial decisions. So if I move this lever here, what happens to retention in this channel, or if I change this dial here, what happens to ARPU for this type of communication? So, and if you then surround that with the right governance, so it's an agile organization, so you know, part of the Vodafone operating model was also to strip away some of the kind of heavy bureaucracy and governance, but put the right governance in place in terms of decision making. So, you know, maybe coming together for an equivalent of a weekly trading meeting to review performance, review the outlook, and make changes. Then better decisions, better commercial decisions in terms of the outcomes of these programs were enabled. And then I think the third component that the new organization enabled was better personalization. So I've already talked at length around what we mean by personalization, but by, again, kind of exploding or bringing together all of these people into one organization, into one squad, meant that everybody was focused on the same KPI. So whatever the purpose of the squad was the objective for everybody in that team. So immediately, people that might have had conflicting or not entirely aligned KPIs came together and understood what they were trying to drive. So then the ability to be able to present, you know, a personalized action with a personalized presentation became possible for the first time, which meant that the experience for the customer was much improved as it was previously. And I think maybe just an anecdote before I talk a little bit about the sort of the outcomes that this drove for Vodafone as a business. One of the anecdotes that I really like from one of the operating companies in Vodafone was that one of the squads included what they call digital engineering. So essentially sort of technology colleagues, people who could, you know, maybe build an integration into a channel or access a new data point for the squad, something like this. And that engineer in a daily stand-up kind of challenged his commercial colleagues around the quality of the experience that they were delivering for their specific squad. So let's say it was a prepaid top-up squad. In itself, maybe so what, but I think it kind of gets to the nub of the culture change that operating company managed to drive. So the fact that that digital engineer felt empowered to be able to challenge commercial people on the quality of the experience that was being delivered, I think is a step change, because that person would never have previously felt empowered to have been able to challenge those individuals. And secondly, that they had the opportunity, that they were in the right place in order to be able to have that conversation, reinforces the value of putting all of these people together to work collaboratively on driving an outcome. So the fact that this engineering guy suggested a problem, proposed a solution, and then the squad agreed that they needed to fix that and they went on and did it, I think just kind of encapsulates for me at an anecdotal level the sort of culture change around moving from this sort of campaign factory mentality into delivering optimum customer experiences. And so, you know, Vodafone is very much on the journey on driving this program, but, you know, they have seen improvements in all of the KPIs that you would expect to see. So improvements in ARPU, reduction in commission costs by being able to substitute digital channels for their legacy telesales channels. I mentioned this before, an improved throughput of activity. So more actions, more activity from the same number of people, because it's a more efficient way of working. Improved value generated from the programs that the teams are driving. In terms of, you know, the bang for buck from the commercial programs that are being executed versus previous, they are improving. So ultimately, as I talked right at the top of the call, this ultimately delivers better value for the organization in terms of ARPU, better value in terms of customer lifetime, and subsequently lifetime value, and then ultimately shareholder value. Okay, that's all we've got for today. We've set aside a little bit of time for Q&A right at the end. I don't know, I've been talking a lot, Mark's been talking a lot. I don't know if we've had any questions come through. Maybe Joel or Mark, have we seen any questions land?
No questions so far from what I see. So this is the chance. We have another couple minutes, so if you have questions on what Simon and Mark are saying, then we're happy to step into those. Okay, it seems not. So I guess whenever we're going to share some contact data after the webinar. So when you have any more questions or would like to get in touch, you can do that anytime, and we're happy to.
Okay. Actually, Joel, I've just
seen. Yeah.
There's a lag here. I've just seen one line. So I have a question here. Where does the decisioning platform sit in the MarTech stack? Okay, that's a good question. I think that is a different answer for probably every client there. But broadly speaking, and guys chip in, because like I say, there'll be a different answer for different people here. But I guess my perspective on this is that it sits on top of the data layer and underneath the activation points. So it's kind of like we say, it's the brain. So you've got your kind of base level data capability, you've got a base level data science capability with all of your analytics, and then decisioning sits on top so that it can ingest all of the different attributes in order to be able to make decisions, and then it pushes out that into the activation channel. So it makes a request to an activation channel to be able to execute that communication out to the customer. That's kind of where I would see decisioning typically sitting. Mark, Joel, any kind of thoughts on that?
Simon runs our decisioning practice, so I don't want to knock the decisioning engines, but what we tend to find in some of our clients is, as Simon said, decisioning is great for building the models and inputting the business rules and the logic that says for these customers in these contexts serve these offers. Depending on your decisioning platform, we do hear from some clients that the user interfaces to kind of do tests and optimizations aren't as friendly as some of the maybe more bespoke tools that you might say get in a digital space. So web optimization, A/B testing tool, for example, might feel a bit more intuitive to a digital marketer than decisioning does. So I agree with Simon. What you can find is other people kind of augment that tech stack with other tools that make people feel more comfortable with the front end interface that they're then using. But it is important in these situations that the decisioning engine also knows about the tests that you're putting into those things, because the models need to know what was served to a customer and how that customer reacted positively or negatively, so it can learn what the best thing to do next is.
Okay, good. Maybe a question for you, Mark. I've got one here. To the question, you mentioned in your presentation the need to get the organization aligned. How much change is required?
Again, it varies. So we've gone into some organizations that are very traditional, very hierarchical, in some quite rigid silos. In that case, a lot needs to change. Whereas some clients, we go in and they've already kind of embraced agility and the need to work in kind of more cross-functional ways. So now it's more about getting people up to speed with the capability that's being used. Some kind of watch outs for me. It's much easier to go through the change if there is a clearly articulated vision that everyone can get behind. So Vodafone was good at this for me. One of the reasons that Vodafone was so successful is very early on in going through the change, they had a clearly articulated vision to the business, and it wasn't about implementing new technology. It was about changing how Vodafone communicated with customers. It was about growing lifetime value by offering more relevant messaging in real time based on the customer's context. And once everyone was kind of behind this idea, it was easier to express why we might reorganize, because it's no longer about serving product offers and hitting product P&Ls. It's about doing what's right for the customer. It's not about planning for the next event. It's about thinking about that customer's latest context and basing the decision based on that. And because we could always kind of tie everything back to the vision, it became much more straightforward. We work with some other clients. I can talk about some retailers where, you know, you've got some parts of the business that want to become a customer organization and other parts of the business that are quite happy to stay as a product organization. And so when you start trying to talk about the change, we don't have alignment at the top. And we've got some people that are saying, I want to make a decision for a customer, and other people that say, no, I want to boost my trading category. And it becomes much harder then to get people together and working in the same way. So what we work with clients is kind of try and understand your maturity and where you are today and where you're strong and where your gaps are, and then figure out kind of what that roadmap is and do it in manageable steps. So does it start with the senior alignment? When do we try and bring together digital and CRM teams? When do we bring the service element in? When do we change all of these different elements? So it can be a lot of change. It can be, you know, a couple of years to get you from where you are today to kind of highest level of maturity, but you don't have to sit and pontificate about it for 2 years and then try and do it as a big bang. Again, it's about being adaptive and going, okay, first steps first, change how we're governed. Second step, bring together digital and CRM, and kind of move through those stages to help you mature and unlock value along the way.
Okay, good.
There has been another question. There has been
okay.
The second question that was, I've heard that decisioning implementation projects can be big and expensive. Is that true? And how do I make sure my project is successful?
Okay.
It's an interesting one.
Yeah, good question. Okay, look, they can be big and expensive, but they don't have to be. And again, I think our strong counsel to our clients that are starting off on the decisioning journey is to try and avoid, I'm going to use an analogy here, try and avoid taking the toys out of the box too early. So there's a temptation when you've got this new shiny toy that you want to get into it straight away and start doing stuff. And our counsel is very much to try and resist that urge and spend a little bit of time thinking about commercially, what is it that you want to try and achieve by having made this investment? And then break down into smaller pieces those commercial objectives. And then once you're clear in terms of what the initial piece, the initial thing you need to deliver in order to be able to demonstrate value back to the business and puts you on that trajectory, then start doing the kind of getting everything out of the box and getting going with it. So spend more time upfront planning and less time diving straight into the project. And if you do that and you approach the kind of implementation in a genuinely agile way, so standing up agile teams, working in an iterative fashion, then it's absolutely possible to deliver not just capability, but return on value within the first 90 days of having started the project. And you know, so you build maybe one use case, execute it through 2 channels. You know, it's an omni-channel capability. You probably want to be able to demonstrate that you can orchestrate across multiple channels, but start really small and then build iteratively. So adding in more channels, adding in more use cases, adding in more complexity to the original use cases as you move forward, but start small. Don't try and start with this enormous kind of monolith. That's when you end up spending a lot of money and not delivering stuff very quickly. And we have examples from our clients where they've seen return on value within 90 days of first implementation. So yeah, I would say spend more time upfront thinking than you think you need to, and start small.
All right, we have 1 minute left. So if there's another quick question, please shoot now. And like I said before, if you have any more questions after this webinar, please feel free to reach out. And if not, I would like to thank Simon and Mark for their time and walking us through this really interesting topic. And I would like to thank everyone who participated today and shared those 60 minutes with us. Looking forward to speak to you soon, and you all have a lovely day and a good rest of the week. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.